and Deckard just takes a shot. Like Deckard takes a shot. He kind of wings Kay, and he falls over a balcony, and he follows them into this old room that's got like an Elvis hologram and showgirls and whatnot. And Deckard is just, they go back and forth a little bit, and he throws Deckard like over a table, and he disarms him with the gun, and Deckard hits him like at least 6 to 8 times, just punching Kay right in the face, and Kay just taking it.
Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak.
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
And we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel. Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Oh, yeah.
If you've been tuning in, then you've seen that we're continuing a filmography for a director that we both like and admire.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just move forward with that. This movie here was directed by Denis Villeneuve, of course. It's who we're covering right now. It was released October the 6th of 2017. Today, the Panel Bros are going to be doing a breakdown for Blade Runner 2049.
Bro, you already know how I feel about this movie. We've talked about this numerous times. This is one of my jams, man. This is a Rick movie, if you will. It's sci-fi, it's cyberpunk, great performances. It's a 2-hour and like 45-minute movie. And it's just one of those movies. It's a great legacy sequel to a film that is well regarded to many people, and we'll discuss that original throughout this one as well. But Blade Runner 2049, I remember seeing this in the theater and just being so amped. Downloaded the soundtrack right away and just listening to it on the car ride home and go, man, what a movie. So anytime we have an opportunity to talk about it, I'm super excited because this is one of those that that lands for me. And this and we're look, I'm gonna gas him up a little bit and we'll talk about it when the scenes start. But this was the moment I saw Dave Bautista like as a legitimate actor. I was like, okay, like this was the movie where I started to really pay attention to what he was bringing to the table. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this one.
So you mentioned legacy sequel. Blade Runner 2049 came out 35 years after the original Blade Runner. That's how long it took for someone to put it out here. I read that Ridley Scott was going to do it. He directed the original, and he got tied up doing Alien Covenant, so he couldn't finish this. And obviously, Denis stepped in, and we're going to talk about how Denis did over the course of this breakdown here. So let's get started. So Blade Runner 2049 is listed in Wikipedia as an epic neo-noir science fiction film. So, and that term that you use that I like to use as well, a little bit of cyberpunk too, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So let's get our screenshot here. In 2049, 30 years after the events of Blade Runner, bioengineered humans known as replicants are still used for slave labor. K, short for serial number KD6-3.7, a Nexus 9 replicant, works for the Los Angeles Police Department as a quote-unquote Blade Runner, an officer who hunts and quote-unquote retires, kills rogue replicant models. So let's take a look at our opening scene here. After a brief recap, we see the eye open there, and we pan out to the landscape, and our flying car's a great opening, you know. We get to see our lead, Kay, played by Ryan Gosling. He lands near a facility, and he goes to see Sapper Morgan, played by Dave Bautista, who is a protein farmer. And obviously resources aren't so good in the future. He's farming grubs for protein. So obviously he figures out Kay's there to retire him. They get into a fight, and towards the end of the fight, he says to him, "How does it feel to retire your own kind?" And Kay says, "My kind doesn't run. Only the older models do." And right before Kay shoots him, Morton says, "You've never seen a miracle." And
Dude.
let's discuss this opening scene here with Batista and such.
This is a great opening scene and introduction, and right off the bat we find out that we're dealing with a replicant as a Blade Runner, which is interesting because one of the biggest fan theories about the original Blade Runner is whether or not Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, was a replicant. That was always something online. You would see numerous conversations of like, is he or isn't he? So we have this Blade Runner 2049 sequel where our lead character, nicknamed K, is a replicant. So right off the bat, we're like, oh, we're dealing with a replicant that is a Blade Runner hunting down older models, which is going to play into an interesting dynamic in the story. But we get to interact with Dave Bautista's character. And one thing that I thought was great is they obviously aged up Dave Bautista. Like you can see the practical makeup they did to kind of age him up a little bit to make him look more run down, more beat up. And I just thought that was cool. A nice little ad for the character. But you have this great scene. This scene is so great. It's shot so well, and it just builds on this tension. Because he walks into his home, and at first you don't see Kay. Like you're kind of just like, wait, where's Kay? And he just walks towards his kitchen, and Kay is just sitting in the shadow, and they have this very quick conversation about the protein farming and the grubs and whatnot. And he pretty much reads him very quickly and goes, oh, I can tell by the medic bag on your hip that this is who you are. This is what you used to do. And right off the back, he's like, are you here to take me in? And Kay says it like, I would much rather do that than the alternative. And he places his weapon on the table. So right off the bat, he's letting him know, like, we can do this. I can bring you in, or I will have to retire you, AKA pretty much end you, put you out of commission. And we get this really quick fight scene, but it's awesome, man. Like he throws Kay through a wall, like literally through the wall. Like, and they have this back and forth really quick. And he is able, Kay is able to scan his eye and get his serial number. And we have this standoff again. And the most interesting thing about it, obviously, is when he says, like, you hunt your own kind. He goes, my kind don't run. So no, I'm not hunting my own kind. Only the older models do. And as you mentioned, he brings up, you've never seen a miracle. And right off the bat, I'm like, what does this mean? Like, what is he referring to? You know what I mean? So already Denis does a real good job of like building intrigue. We get this, great opening sequence, which again, it looks incredible, man. As you said, like it's gorgeous. The scope right away lets you know that this is going to be a big film. Like it just feels big. You have Hans Zimmer's score swelling up. So right off the bat, you get a great feeling of size, if that makes any sense. But that one line, like, you've never seen a miracle, I was like, ooh, I don't know what this means, but what is he referring to? Like, what is it that it has him living the way that he does? So I was very, very curious, but unfortunately, Kay does end up having to kill him because he's not going to go in without a fight.
So for me, there had to be a suspension of disbelief with Dave Bautista.
The size difference, right?
Right, because we've seen this before when we watch movies. Of course, the hero is always smaller than the people they're going against. Not always, but a lot of times. But Ricardo, you and I have that that advantage of seeing what Dave Bautista can do to people, both in a wrestling ring and also, didn't he do some MMA as well?
Yeah, dude, he did real life mixed martial arts. He fought in the octagon. He's a big dude, and like you, like you said, like you kind of go, oh, if these two got into a fight, there'd be no way. But they make it work within the context of the movie. Obviously, with Bautista's character being a much older model, I think that's why they aged him up.
Yeah,
I think that was a big point of why they like really, really wanted to age him up, make him look older. And they make it a point that, yes, like Ryan Gosling's character Kay is getting like manhandled, but he gets one good shot on the throat of Bautista's character, and that kind of like seals the deal. Like he has trouble breathing. I'm like, okay, all right, we're good.
Right. And like you said, he put him through the wall, so it's like, okay, we got.
Dude, he rocked Kay, bro. Like he banged his head against the wall probably like anywhere from 6 to 12 times, because it's very quick, and it's bam, 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 and he throws him through the wall. And he's pretty much got Kay dead to rights, but Kay's able to just sweep him over and hit him just one good time in the throat.
Yeah, just to give you folks a timeline here, if you're listening to this as of this recording, it's early 2025.
Mhm.
Dave Bautista has slimmed down
Oh, a lot.
tremendously since
Yeah.
this movie was filmed and released in 2017. So
Mhm.
he was
Oh,
huge.
yeah, Batista
He
was
was
huge, dude.
huge. He was still pretty big before he started slimming down. I did want to take a moment to talk about replicants themselves because
Mhm.
a lot of folks are unclear of what a replicant is. We've
Yeah.
seen so many different movies that we automatically think that, like, are they robots? What's the
Mhm.
deal here? So, from what I've been able to gather in the Blade Runner universe, replicants are just genetically altered or modified people. Like they grow people in a lab.
Yeah.
That's my
Yep.
guess.
Yeah.
And then they just, they're in the world now after that. But they're made to be like slaves,
Yeah.
and they have to do the bidding of the people. And then eventually, I guess the replicants didn't like that anymore. And then
Yeah.
that's how Blade Runner came to be. If you could give your take on the replicant situation,
Oh
please.
yeah, 100%. Especially with the replicants, like we've seen it in different sci-fi films and stories, right? Where they use something else as slave labor, right? So the idea of using something that, let's say they use the machines, the idea of using a machine is always something that is worrisome because if the machine ever decided to fight back, we would clearly be outmatched by a machine in strength and all of those features. So what they did is they created like these replicants, which are, like you said, just bioengineered human beings. And because they were grown in a lab, they are given them specific purposes. So there's like this guilt-free, like, well, they're not technically human. Like we just grew them in the lab and we bioengineer them so that way we can use them as slave labor. And should they rebel, it would not be hard to put them down because essentially they would suffer from mortal wounds like a human being would. So as opposed to like having machines like what's that movie? iRobot. Like remember in iRobot, they had like actual machines in people's homes doing his bidding. But as you saw, when the machines wanted to fight and take over, it was very hard to deal with them because they were machines. Where in this universe, it's like, hey, cheap slave labor will bioengineer human beings, but they'll be less than because we made them in a lab, so they don't matter. And give them artificial memories and things like that so they can feel human and understand human things, but not be entirely human. So, yeah, so they're not robots or cybernetic organisms or anything like that. They are actually bioengineered human beings, just lesser than human because of how the society views them and whatnot. I think in this movie, what was the term that we heard? Was it skin bag, skin tag? There was some sort of
Yeah.
derogatory term that people used against K and other replicants. You know what I mean? But in a nutshell, yeah, they're very close to human outside of some pretty important issues.
Yeah. Skin jobs or skinners.
Skin job. There you go. That was the
Yeah.
one that I kept hearing, like skin jobs. Yep.
There you go. Alrighty. Thank you for that. So shortly after this scene, Kay goes back to his apartment, and we meet Joy,
Yes.
played by Ana de Armas. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so she's an AI
Mm-hmm.
and a companion AI that is just there for him in the apartment and such. Um, she enhances his lifestyle, so to speak, so that he's not lonely.
Yeah.
That's well, we get to find out she isn't the only Joy, but we'll get to that
Oh,
later. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, but it's his Joy, and to celebrate their quote unquote anniversary, he buys her an emanator. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a device that allows her to leave the apartment, and they said used and stored remotely, and now she can go anywhere in the world as long as he has the emanator with him, and
Yeah.
that comes into play later on. Uh, any quick thoughts on this opening scene with Joy? Because it's really nice.
It is really nice, and again, it kind of shows us where K is. Where, and again, it's humanizing the replicants again because I feel like if you hadn't seen the original Blade Runner, or if it's been a long time since you've seen it, you still might have questions about replicants. But again, there is this almost human like feeling that they possess, and the idea that a replicant can feel lonely is important, because it kind of humanizes them a little bit. So you have this great interaction with him and Joy. It's almost like having the companion at home. He comes home, she goes, oh hi honey, how was your day? And he was like, oh, this and that. And like it's really interesting because I'm like, well, he's aware like Kay is aware that this is just AI. This is not a quote unquote real being.
Right.
But then it again, and we'll talk about this more as the movie goes on, where we start to ask question like what defines real? You know what I mean? Like what defines real? But the scene was really cool because he brings the Eminator and he's like, you can go anywhere in the world now. And where do you want to go? And she doesn't say it, and he takes her to the roof and it's raining. And this scene was very, very cool because she obviously can't touch the rain. She can't feel the rain. She can't make any kind of actual contact with Kay. But using her abilities, she's watching the rain essentially go through her because she's not real. And she starts to make the calculations of what raindrops hitting her skin would look like. So after a few minutes of like syncing up, if you will, she's able to do that. So that way, when Kay looks at her, it gives off the illusion that she's actually standing with him in rain. Her hair starts to look wet. Her skin starts to look wet. There's a glow. There's a glisten to her. And I'm watching this and I'm like, oh man, that's so awesome. It's not real. She's literally just creating this image for him. And she even goes up to him and they mimic the idea of touching one another, but they can't.
Right.
So they're very close, but they can actually not make contact. So it's just this illusion. And it's sad. It's a really sad thing. You know, it's beautiful that there is this that Kay is trying to have this type of connection, and this is the only type of connection that he can have. But at the end of the day, you realize that it's not real, it's not authentic. And if you needed a stark reminder, his phone goes off and she completely just freezes in place. And he just looks at her, and it's that reminder of just like, yeah, man, like it's like this isn't real. But again, we'll talk about what's real as the movie goes on.
Yeah, and to your point, it just goes to show that this is just the argument that the first Blade Runner started is, are replicants people?
Mm-hmm.
And here we have, I mean, and then something happened in the first one where, you know, it became intense as far as to why replicants are people, but this just continued the conversation. Mm-hmm. Yes, he's a replicant, but these are just desires that he has, companionship. Yeah. You know, he wouldn't have this joy if he didn't feel that, you know, and it'll go into play as far as our plot goes here. After retiring replicant Sapper Morgan, Kay finds a box buried under a tree at Morton's farm. It contained the remains of a female replicant who died during a cesarean section. So we find out that a replicant had a baby. This is a bombshell, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
This demonstrates that replicants could reproduce biologically, previously thought impossible. Mm-hmm. Kay's superior, Lieutenant Joshi, fears this knowledge could lead to war between humans and replicants, so she orders Kay to retire the replicant child. So let's unpack this here. This is history, and Kay is being ordered to end it. This is the first replicant natural birth ever. Mm-hmm. The dialogue is as follows. Kay, I've never retired something that was born before. Joshi, what's the difference? Kay, to be born is to have a soul, I guess. Joshi, are you telling me no? Kay, I wasn't aware there was an option, madam. Joshi, attaboy. As Kay's walking through the door, Joshi says, hey, you've been getting on fine without one. What's that, madam? Joshi says, a soul.
This, first of all, like the idea that a replicant could have a child, like you said, is a bombshell.
Right.
Again, we start to blur the line between, you know, replicants and human beings and what counts as what. And Kay's, he's the only one that kind of notices it because they find these bones, this skeleton underneath the tree, and they're kind of zooming in on it, and they're looking, and they're like, oh, like there was a C-section, looks like she lost her life during childbirth, and they're trying to make a connection with Batista's character and say like, oh, like he obviously cared for her. Like that was a big thing. It wasn't just he discarded a body. Like, no, like the way it was protected and laid under this tree, he cared for her. So that was interesting. So there was some sort of connection between those two replicants, and then finding out that a child was born is absolutely insane. And now the it's kind of hitting Kay that he's like he said, because I've never had to retire something that was born, and bring this conversation of souls and whatnot, and goes, I don't know, and then she hits him with that line, like, you've gotten all fine without one. It says a soul. Like, that stings, dude. It stings because, again, like, it's that reminder still that they do not view replicants on the same level as a human being. They just don't. And one thing that we see that kind of alludes to that, and we'll talk about it because it happens later in the film, is the baseline testing that they have for replicants.
Yeah.
Where after he does a job, he has to do a baseline testing, and it's pretty much, they give him a word to repeat regardless of what he hears, and they ask really human personal questions. What does it feel to be in love? What does it feel to hold hands? What does it feel to lose someone? And usually about having that baseline, he can just completely disregard those questions because it has no emotional attachment or whatever. It's just basically, nope, just say these words and move on. And it just goes to show you that, like, again, it's how they view these replicants. Like, you are a model, you are a serial number, this is where you stay in line, this is this. And he does the baseline test and he's completely fine. But now the idea of retiring something that was born, I'm sure, is going to play a heavy role, or take a heavy toll, I should say, on his conscience, if that's what they would call it. So this whole sequence, like, just kind of like kicked the door down and gave us something like really exciting to look forward to, because now we're talking about like an actual life being born.
You brought up the test. I read somewhere that was Ryan Gosling's idea, actually.
Ooh,
And
okay.
it was a form of an acting technique. And
okay.
the method of the acting technique, I don't have it in front of me right now though, but yeah, so that was kind of his idea, and it's really intense too.
It is.
Like, he's going back and forth, back and forth. And if you remember back to your acting exercising days, that's sort of some of the acting exercises you would go through,
Oh yeah.
So that makes sense to me. That was something that he came up with there. So
that is really cool, because again, like, his responses are very quick. It's like interlinked. How does it feel to open hands? Interlinked. What does it feel to lose someone you love? Interlinked. Like, it's like you don't think about it. Just go. And like you said, there are tests, there are exercises like that we would perform. So that's really cool. That's really cool that Ryan, had that idea, because it works really well.
Yeah. Alrighty. So Kay visits the Wallace Corporation, successor to the defunct Tyrell Corporation, in the manufacture of replicants. DNA archives identified the deceased female as Rachel, an experimental Nexus 7 replicant. Kay learns of Rachel's romantic ties with former Blade Runner Rick Deckard.
Yes.
And CEO Neander Wallace, played by Jared Leto, wants the secret to replicant reproduction to expand interstellar colonization. He sends his replicant enforcer, Love, to monitor Kay. At Morton's farm, Kay finds the date 6/10/21 carved into the tree trunk and recognizes it from a childhood memory of a wooden toy horse. Because replicant memories are artificial, Kay's holographic AI girlfriend, Joi, believes this is evidence that Kay was born, not created. Another bombshell.
Like, again, like, we're getting, Denis does really good with, like, twists, changes in the narrative, and especially for our protagonist of the movie. So this idea that, first of all, we're finding out it's Rachel, which is a big deal to me. Like, anyone who watched the original Blade Runner is like, oh my god, like, it's Rachel. So then we're thinking Rachel, we're thinking Deckard, we're thinking, like, wait, what's going on? But the idea that he has these memories, and we'll learn more about these memories, how they're artificial and that they're implanted, so that way replicants can have some sort of understanding of human emotion and whatnot. But the idea that the dates match up, and Joi introduces the idea of, like, oh, like, there's a possibility that, like, that isn't an implanted memory. What if that's real? Like, maybe you're not a replicant. What if you were indeed born. And I love this because, again, one of the biggest things about the original Blade Runner was whether or not Rick Deckard was a replicant. And in this movie, we have a replicant, and now we're introducing the idea that they might be a human being. And it's just it's so great to have that kind of like that mirror image with this character K. Also, I want to put over Love is amazing. Like,
yeah, intense.
She's so intense in this movie, dude. She's one of my favorite characters in this movie. Every time she's on screen, she is so intense, and I just want to put her over really fast because I'm going to gush about her as the movie continues.
So, during this conversation, Joi, she's asking him now if he really wants to go through with retiring the replicant that was born, because now she finds out this new information. You know, do you really want to go through with this? And this is the first time we see Kay starting to struggle, you know, with this decision here.
This was the first time Joi started to make me wonder just what joy is, because again, like I'm like, oh, it's just AI, you know, like she's just gonna say the right things, right, to make him feel good. But now she's introducing this concept that I never thought in a million years that an AI a partner, companion would bring up, because this is game changing. And she's like, are you sure? Do you want to do this? Do you want to retire? And I'm like, hold on, what is joy for a second? Like, this whole movie is about questioning, again, like what's the difference between replicants and humans, like technology and the ability to think on his own. Does that make it more human than not? But I just like the idea that they're introducing that these doubts with Joi and Kay.
Kay discovers in LAPD records 2 children born on that date with identical DNA aside from the sex chromosome, but only the boy is listed as alive. So he's traveling along here, and his car gets tagged.
Oh,
and I imagine that's an EMP.
Because
magnetic pulse.
It was really cool because like he gets tagged, and it opens up like a very like futuristic cyberpunk kite, and it opens it in the clouds in the sky during a thunderstorm, and it gets struck by lightning, and it just sends a shock through the whole system of the vehicle. And Joy's in the car with him, like Joy's in the, and there's little details about, again, the difference between Kay and Joi, because if you watch, and it's something minor, but Joy's not wearing a seatbelt in the car. Right. Like we see, and it's another reminder of that he is there, he is present, he is physical, she is not. And it's this reminder, and he even says to her, buckle up. And it's like, again, it's this weird notion of like, she doesn't have to, she doesn't exist, she's not real. But yeah, he gets taken down right now.
So, you know, the car goes down, and you know, in the mid sentence, she shuts off too, because she's a part of it, obviously. Yep. So he lands into, I guess, this junkyard world type situation. It was reminiscent of the Junkions and Transformers the movie for me. That was what I thought about. Yeah. So Kay tracks the child to an orphanage. That's where he lands here. But the records from that year are missing. Kay recognizes the orphanage from his memories and finds the toy horse in the furnace where he remembers hiding it. Replicant memory designer Dr. Anna Stelline confirms that his memory of the orphanage is authentic, leading Kay to conclude he is Rachel's son.
Bro, here
we go again.
My mind again, Denis Villeneuve is just blowing our minds throughout the movie. So obviously when he goes there and he's interacting, and the pages are missing, but he recognizes the location. Like you see him looking around, and he's walking around, and we as a viewer are kind of like, uh-oh, this looks like the place from his dream. And obviously he talked about the dream earlier in the movie with Joshi, where he says, oh, I had this dream. I was a kid. I had this toy wooden horse. The other kids wanted to take it away, so I hid it from them, and I did this, did that. And she goes, oh, that's a nice dream. It does this for your subconscious, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as he's walking around this location, he's recognizing it. Like, my heart started beating faster and faster, because I was like, oh, this is real. Like, oh, this these memories have to be real. And when he goes, Ryan Gosling does such a good job because he finds the wooden horse. He goes to the place in his dream and he finds it, and you just see the realization in his face where like it's starting to come through, where it's like, is this real? And then he goes to the one who creates these artificial memories and whatnot. And she tells them, she goes, I can see if it's authentic. Like I can see. And there's so much stress on Kay at this point. Like you can feel it. Like it's just eluding from him. And she's looking at it, and she does a great job too, because her eyes get really watery and a tear falls because she realizes that this is an authentic memory. And he freaks out, rightfully so. Like we've seen this meme online. It became like a viral meme after a while, where like Ryan Gosling was freaking out and like and kicking the chair and walking away, and everyone made like a big joke of the meme, using it whenever they were frustrated. But I can't imagine at all what Kay's feeling, because now it's not only the reveal that he is not a replicant, that he's actually a human, that he's something more than just a replicant, that he's something more than what society dictates a replicant. He was born, and his mother is Rachel. And like that, like what a mind trip, man.
Yeah. And justifiably so, him flipping out, he was, what makes it a good moment here is because he's pretty stoic up until this moment here.
Yes. The whole movie, he's stoic. Yes.
And then at this moment, he's not. No, that's too much.
Yeah, dude. Even in life and death situations, when he's fighting, he's still very much like, I would rather not do this. Can we not fight? Like he's very stoic. And when he's talking to Joi, there's no panic. There's no sense of fear in his voice. There's none of that. And this is the first time he kind of has what many people would call a human outburst.
Right.
And it's just like, oh my God. And we already know this kind of screws up the baseline a little bit.
Yeah. So I found the information about the baseline test here. I wanted to read this back because Kay has to go back and perform this test again, and it doesn't go so well. But the baseline test that he must recite back, it was Ryan Gosling's idea. He employed an acting technique called dropping in, which induced a trance-like and hypnotic effect on his performance. So that's where he got the idea from. So heading back, Kay has to perform the baseline test again, and he fails miserably.
He's now way off.
Yeah, he's now marked as a rogue. Understandably so, after this bombshell news that he got. When he implies to Joshi that he killed the replicant child, she gives him 48 hours to pass the test, or he too will be quote unquote retired. All righty, so a little bit more.
And like you said, it's understandably so. Like, and you can see it, and it's so awesome that they showed us the baseline testing before and how he responds and how he's responding to the questions now. There's doubt, there's fear, there's actual thought. So when they're like interlink, and he's like interlink, and then they ask him like a really personal question: what does it mean to love? What does it mean to lose someone? He's pausing.
Right.
Like he's like, it's pausing, and he's actually thinking about those questions. And they're like, dude, you're not even close. And Joshi only gives him a break, as you mentioned. She only cuts him some slack because he lies, and he says it's done. Right. She's like, what's done? He was like, it's done. The kid, I did what you wanted me to do. And she's like, oh my God, you don't understand what you just did. You just stopped the bomb from going off. Okay. So she's thinking, because of something that he just had to do, it was traumatic enough to kind of throw him off his baseline. So she's like, you got 48 hours or you're going to get retired. But again, justifiably so. He's a little off base, and it makes sense.
So we have a little bit more time with Joi here in a moment that I know you're going to talk about.
Dude, this scene.
So Joi hires replicant prostitute Mariette as a surrogate for her so she could have relations with Kay. The following morning, Mariette places a tracker on Kay's jacket prior to being sent away by Joi, who is noticeably affected, even though this whole thing was her idea. So we can leave this up for a second, and I'll let you said some things to me off the air about this one scene and how they presented it.
Yeah, this scene was mind-blowing, man, because we essentially have this moment where Joi, and we've kind of seen something similar like in the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett
Right.
Johansson using an earpiece and someone who is being paid to
Right. Good shout.
yeah, man, to have this kind of like a physical moment with the character. So again, and the idea that it's Joy's idea, they keep putting elements into this movie where I even start to question Joy. Like, does Joy feel anything? Because she wants this, and she even tells Kay, like, I can tell that, you know, you liked her. I can tell. So I'm making this happen. And Kay is kind of resenting it at first because it's not, again, he's still well aware that Joy is not physical. So it's just like, no, like this, let's not do this. And she's like, no, and she pretty much pleads with him to do this. And just from like a technical standpoint, visual effects and everything they do in this scene, it looks incredible. Like, you see our character, you see the woman standing there in front of Kay, and you have Joy kind of just like walk onto her, and she's trying to sync up their bodies. And she even tells her, like, she's like, oh wow, she goes, hey, all right, don't speak, I need to sync up. And it's just so awesome the way they do it, because you see glimpses of both of them throughout this entire sequence. So as they merge their faces together, you kind of get this new face that looks like both. And then in certain movements, you just see Joy. And then in other movements, you just see the other woman, whose name I am blanking on.
Mariette.
Mariette, thank you.
Played by Mackenzie Davis.
Yeah. Yes, I love Mackenzie Davis,
yeah,
dude.
Yeah.
So Mariette and Joy, they're kind of merging, but they're slightly different. And there's this one shot in the movie, man, that's so awesome. It's the hands behind the head, where Mariette puts her hands behind his head and she's rubbing his hair, and you see Joy's and you see hers. And just like from like a technical standpoint, it just looks so interesting. But one of the most character interesting points about the scene, I think, is the next morning, as you mentioned, where Mariette is planting something in Kay's jacket, and you see Joy, and Joy kind of has this look of like, I don't know if it's jealousy, but she's kind of like, okay, your job's done, you can go. Like it almost feels like a companion, where she's like, okay, no, you can go. Like, she notices that Mary is looking at Kay as Kay's getting cleaned off. He's in the shower, and Joy just kind of pops up like a girlfriend and just like, no, all right, we're done. You can go.
Right.
You can go. And Mariette says something is like, hey, like I was just inside you and there's not much there. Kind of like letting her, like Mariette was reminding her, like, you're just a hologram, dude.
Right.
Like, you're not real. Don't catch feelings over this. And again, we have this combative nature of like what's real and what isn't. But yeah, this whole sequence was awesome.
So Joy asks Kay to bring her with him remotely, and if they because if the people looking for him find her, they can look through her memories and find Kay.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting part is, though, if he takes Joy with him remotely, she can be destroyed, all on the Emanator. So that's the risk here. And here's our next part here with a familiar face.
Yeah, dude.
Harrison Ford is Deckard.
Kudos. Look, major props to Harrison Ford, because Harrison Ford is one of those actors that everyone likes to make jokes that he's in his like I don't care phase. But anytime he needs to put on a performance, your boy Harrison Ford is on. And when he was here, seeing him again on screen, I was like, oh, it's great, because it's not Harrison Ford just being Harrison Ford. I was like, no, that's Rick Deckard. Like I feel Rick Deckard here, and it was awesome.
Yeah, and they and good on him for coming back to the role, because sometimes people don't want to come back to these iconic roles, and he's like, no, I'm coming back.
Oh yeah, it got legacy sequel, and he does a great job here.
Analysis of the toy horse leads Kay to the ruins of a radioactive Las Vegas, and there he finds Deckard. So let's talk about this moment here. They do fight briefly, and to me, the standout part is towards the end, where Deckard says, "We could keep it this, or we can get a drink," and Kay says, "I'll take the drink."
I'll take that drink, please. Like, it's
but they go at it for a little bit, back and forth.
Dude.
The old guy packs a punch,
dude, and like it gets to a point where Kay's just like, I'm not gonna fight you. I don't want to do this. Like, I just have questions. And Deckard just takes a shot. Like, Deckard takes a shot. He kind of wings Kay, and he falls over a balcony, and he follows them into this old room that's got like an Elvis hologram and showgirls and whatnot. And Deckard is just, they go back and forth a little bit, and he throws Deckard like over a table, and he disarms him with the gun, and Deckard hits him like at least 6 to 8 times, just punching Kay right in the face, and Kay's just taking it. It's almost humorous to a degree, because every time he hits Kay and Kay is taking it, you hear Deckard just kind of breathing harder and harder, like he's throwing everything, and he's just tired. You know what I mean? He just kind of look, we can keep doing this, or we can get a drink. He even stops to say, I like this song. You know what I mean? Like, he's tired. Like, he's like, I like the song. And Kay's just like, what? He's like, we keep doing this so we can get a drink. He goes, and he takes Deckard's gun. He makes sure he takes Deckard's gun. He puts in his pocket, because he's like, I'm not trying to get shot. And he's like, yeah, I think I'll take that drink. And now we're about to have a good conversation between the two.
Yeah, so that takes us to the conversation that they have here. Deckard informs him that he is the father of Rachel's child. So Deckard knows that this is possible, but they've been hiding it from everybody because of the ramifications that it brings. And he scrambled the birth records to protect their offspring's identity. Deckard left the child in the custody of the Replicant Freedom Movement. And any thoughts here about Kay asking Deckard about the child? Because, well, if you notice, he was really like, I don't want to answer these questions, you know?
Yeah. This sequence was interesting because obviously we find out now that he is the father of the child. So up to this point, we have every reason to believe that Rick is Kay's father. Like, we have every reason to believe, and Kay's not saying that.
No,
Kay is not putting that out there just yet. But that, like, he's asking these questions, and when it comes out, it's like, oh man, it's talking about scrambling this, and he gave it to the replicants to pretty much hide the offspring, and Kay believes it to be him. Like, this part was so interesting because, again, it shows you how far Rick Deckard was willing to go to protect the offspring. To just completely scramble the records, and as tragic as it is, to give up his child to the replicants and saying, do what needs to be done to protect this child and whatnot. So there's a lot of revelations that we're having right here, but right now Kay is like, again, internally holding it all in, but Kay is definitely pondering the idea that, like, oh my God, this could be my father right here.
Right. And the priority is the child, because they know that that's the focus that they're trying to terminate right now.
Yeah,
you know, so retire, so to speak. So Love kills Joshi in a very quick scene there, and tracks Kay to Las Vegas, where he's with Deckard. She kidnaps Deckard, destroys Joi, and then leaves a weakened Kay behind. So Love beats Kay up really bad. She whoops him.
Oh,
and we have this cold moment here of her stepping on the emanator. Joi says, I love you, at the moment she steps on it and destroys her.
Yeah, again, everything that happens with Joi makes me question everything, because Joi comes out on her own and pleads with Love to spare him.
Right.
Like, she's like, please, just please spare him. And it's just like, wow, like, again, you buy the idea, like, you buy into it. Like, I'm like, oh man, like, maybe Joi is much more than just a program. Like, maybe she does care. Like, again, the whole movie makes me question, like, can she actually care for him? But yeah, like, she's like, please, like, just leave him alone. And Kay is tore up, dude, because there was this explosion that happens, and he gets pierced, and we see some sort of like shrapnel or metal that is actually like through the side of his hip, and it's protruding through his stomach. So he is down for the count. And after Love gives him a good beating, she destroys Joi, and it broke my heart. And like, and he's watching her, and she, like you said, she kind of says, I love you, and then that's the end of it. And Yeah, that was a pretty tragic moment right there. And she takes Deckard and takes off. And I was really bummed that we lost Joy right here. I was really bummed.
Yeah, in an intense movie with lots of dramatic moments, Ana de Armas brought some charm to the movie. You know,
Yeah.
and Joy was used sparingly, but every time
Mhm.
she came on, it was really nice to have her.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to feel something when Joy gets destroyed here, and we do.
Oh, and we do. Yep.
Using Mariette's tracker, the Replicant Freedom Movement rescues Kay. When their leader, Freyja, discloses to him that Rachel's child was a girl, Kay deduces that Stelline is her daughter and that the toy horse memory is hers.
Mm-hmm.
Fearing Deckard may give up Stelline or the Freedom Movement to Wallace, Fraser urges Kay to kill Deckard.
Yeah.
So brings us to our next scene here.
This was a hit too, man, because at this everything up to this point made me believe Kay was the offspring. And
Right.
now he's starting to put two and two together that like, oh no, she just mentioned that the offspring was a girl. And it's like, oh, it's not the memory is authentic, but it's not his.
Right.
And it's kind of like this. It's kind of a sad moment because up to this point you thought it was him and it's not. And I was like, oh man, like I was kind of bummed. Like, oh man, it's not him.
Right.
And
But
I was
then
like,
he
okay.
realizes it's Dr. Anna from before,
Yeah.
who he already
Yeah.
spoke with. So
Yep.
So we have Jared Leto here.
Jared Leto, man.
Love takes Deckard to meet Wallace, who offers Deckard a duplicate Rachel in exchange for information about his child's whereabouts. So the secret's out. Listen, we know, but I want to continue doing this.
Yeah.
You know, that's Wallace's plan. And Deckard refuses with the line. He says her eyes were green.
This was a good scene, man.
Yeah. And so Love kills the duplicate. So I put down here that the duplicate looked just like her. You know,
dude,
from the original. So I
Yeah.
had to look it up. Archival footage, audio, and stills of Sean Young from the original film are used to represent both her original character of Rachel and a duplicate of the character created by Neander Wallace.
Yeah.
Young's likeness was digitally superimposed onto Lauren Pita, who was coached by Young on how to recreate her performance from the first film. The voice of the replicant was created with the use of a sound-alike actress to Young, and Young was credited for her work. So how cool is that?
There's a lot of moving pieces here to make it work, and it worked. I remember seeing this. I'm pretty sure I saw it in IMAX. I could be wrong, but I remember seeing it on the big screen. And when Rachel walks out of the shadows, I was blown away at how real it looked. I was like, that's Rachel. Like, that's Rachel, especially in a day and age now where we see a lot of de-aging of actors. We're seeing deep fakes. We're seeing the use of AI and whatnot. A lot of it can be jarring. It doesn't really match up. But the way they handled this here worked so well. And one of the key things that they did, if you notice, is that whenever she's talking, it's very minimal. A lot of the shots of her talking are from behind her, and we're getting Rick's expression. Like, we're getting his facial expressions to her talking, but it's behind her. So a lot of her movements are still movements. It's just kind of like her eyes are just kind of looking at Deckard. And we do get a line from her facing him, but again, it's very minimal. So that way, one of the biggest things that we've noticed that with like de-aging and deep fakes and whatnot, the mouth is very hard to do.
Right.
So they did it in such a way that it was minimal and you really couldn't pick it apart. And it was great. And like you said, he Rick is kind of taken back by it. Like it's literally the love of his life as he remembers her standing in front of him, but he knows it's not her. And he kind of just looks at Wallace and he's just like, her eyes were green. And it's just that like that little thing that reminds him like that this is not her. It will never be her. And Love takes out the duplicate, which was a bummer. But Wallace is that dude. All Wallace cares about, like you said, is the idea of being able to have replicants reproduce. Like the idea that they could do this. Like we saw something in the beginning of the movie where he had a replicant, quote unquote, born, and as he's scanning her, he realizes she can't reproduce, and he retires her.
Right.
He just ends her, like, and it's just like, oh, and like you see even like this human expression from love, like just being heartbroken. So at this point in the movie, it's become very clear what Wallace's intentions are, and he's willing to give a duplicate of Rachel to Rick if he can just tell him where the offspring is, because he knows with that offspring there's a possibility of reproducing more and more replicants in a way that he would be viewed as almost like a god, if you will. Like he made these replicants who can reproduce and whatnot.
Because the corporation could grow even more. It's a money thing. It's a power thing. It's this is the man that made it be so replicants could have children. You know.
I also like, again, they tease the idea of who is Rick Deckard, because Wallace even says something along the lines of like, maybe this was all set up. Maybe you were specifically chosen for Rachel and she was specifically chosen for you because they knew this could be done. What makes you so real? Again, we're introducing the idea that way back in the day that people theorize, is he a replicant? Is Deckard a replicant or not? So when Wallace here is having this conversation, it's like, oh, how do you know? How do you know that this wasn't organized? How do you know you weren't set up? How do you know you weren't created for this purpose? And he's like, I know it's real. In the Harrison Ford groggly voice, he's like, I know it's real. You know what I mean? But yeah, this was a good one.
But I'm glad that we still don't get that definitive answer if Deckard is a replicant or not. That's a part of the Blade Runner lore, in my opinion.
Yeah, and depending on which version of the first movie you see, there's like 3 cuts of this movie. Some are a little bit more definitive in that answer, and some are way more vague. So it depends.
Yeah. So we move to another scene here that we're going to chat about. We talked about off the air a little bit, and I had to pull this exact screenshot because it's a great moment in the movie.
Yes.
Pretty iconic. Another meme.
Oh yeah. Another meme. Yes, another meme.
Another meme. So Joi appears to Kay again, but it isn't his Joi. It's an ad for the Joi program. This Joi is selling the program to him as he mourns losing his Joi. Kay contemplates his decision. Will he kill Deckard to save the replicants, or will he save Deckard? He rips the bandage off his face as he makes his decision. So this is a heavy decision. Kay was one of their most reliable soldiers, and with the news of the born replicants and everything the other replicants have gone through, he's fighting himself with deciding what to do. And I put down here, this scene with the hologram of Joi isn't just an ad. It's Kay being faced with Joi, who was essentially his love, and himself with the other replicants. You know, Joi felt real to him, so why can't the replicants be treated as such? That's what I put down here. It wasn't just an ad for Joi. He was being reminded of all the memories he had with Joi, and then also, like I put down, like everything he felt with Joi felt real to him. And then now it's a situation of, if I can feel realness from her and she can feel real to me, then why can't we feel real to other people? And that's what I got from it.
Yeah, and it's a very good take, because obviously, like the Joi, again, they made me question Joi throughout the movie. And he's having this real, what the movie would say as a human interaction, a human response, human emotions, based on how the movie would say, because again, to them, he's just a replicant. He doesn't have these type of feelings and whatnot. And he's looking at this version of Joi that is not his Joi, but knowing that there was a version of Joi that was authentic, that was real, that shared a real bond. It's a really important scene. And, you know, we're seeing this Joi. She's gigantic, dude. She's like 200 feet tall. It's Ana de Armas. She's bare, completely bare and nude, and like it kind of takes you by surprise a little bit, because you're just like, oh wow, and there's zero from Kay in this scene. Like he's just looking at her, and it's almost as if he's looking through her because he knows that's not his Joi. She bears her likeness. She is the program. She goes back into the billboard, and it does the whole like, oh, have your own Joi, do this, do that. And again, it's that reminder of like you said, like if you can have this type of interaction with Joi and feel real and authentic, like what's that to stop from replicants from having these real feelings and these real emotions and whatnot, and having these real experiences, real bonds, and everything else. But yeah, it's much more than just having a scene where they're kind of looking at each other. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I felt like Denis put this as a wow moment on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a lot of choices here. Clearly, the big one was Ana de Armas being completely nude. That was a
Mm-hmm.
choice, you know.
Yeah.
Another choice was the colors. You
Yeah.
know, it's she's purple, I think. You know, it's yeah, she's purple, you know, with the blue hair, you know, pink,
Yeah.
excuse me, pink,
Yeah.
with the blue hair. She's huge. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
she's the size of a building.
Yeah, dude, she's a kaiju. She is humongous.
You know, and she's just sitting there like
Yeah.
she's talking to Kay, and she calls him Joe, which is
Joe,
something that
yes.
happened between him and Joi throughout the movie.
Mhm.
And to your point, Kay's just like broken. He's
Yeah.
broken at this point.
Yeah, completely shattered at the, yeah.
You know,
She says she does the whole like, you look lonely, and you know, she goes, I can fix that, I can help you with that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it feels nothing. Like it's not her. And again, if he can have that type of real connection with Joi and have it reciprocated, again, it kind of throws a wrench into the machine that they, like, when they say they can't have these things, they absolutely can, and it's worth fighting for.
yeah, and Denis could have done so many different things to for, because clearly Joi needed to be the person to remind him of what he's doing and
Mhm.
why and what's happening and why he's having the struggle within him. But Denis decided to go big, both literally and
Yeah.
figuratively, for this moment here. But she's done a few things
Mhm.
over the years, but I want to say this is the moment where people raised eyebrows for Ana de Armas.
I agree. I think Ana de Armas at this point, I don't want to say I don't think she wasn't a household name yet. I don't want to say that, I'm not sure, but I had seen her in some things. But when she got cast, and in this, I was like, oh, this is a very big picture. Like, this is a very big film. And then watching her, she's so electric on screen, man, and she's so delightful. That I think I agree with you 100% that like this was the moment where people started to really pay attention to Ana de Armas, was in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, she was awesome throughout the entire movie, but this is the wow moment of her
Oh yeah,
performance
yeah.
in the entire movie, you know? As Love transports Deckard to be tortured off-world, Kay intercedes. It's a big explosion, and you know, he jumps in to save Deckard, and you know, the water's coming in, and he has to save him. He fights and drowns Love to death, but is severely wounded in the process. Over the course of the fight, Love says, "I'm the best one."
Oh
And
yeah.
cold line, real cold
Dude,
line.
she's vicious, man. I loved her, but she's so vicious in this movie.
Yeah, so just another great fight. This movie has a few good fights in it.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, they don't last too
They're
long.
few and far between, but when they have them, they're on point.
Yeah, just a great fight between him and her, and um, he outsmarts her. You know, because
Yeah.
fists aren't working, blades aren't working because he's getting stabbed up, and then it
Mhm.
just hits him. You know, I have to drown her, and
Yeah.
you know, it was the water inside of the vehicle there is where
Yeah.
he was able to defeat her.
Yeah, and look, and he is so beaten and battered at this point, and they're fighting, and like it just looks visually amazing. Like you have water rushing into the vehicle, it's heavy rain, waves everywhere, so they're fighting all this. And again, we have this very stoic nature in Kay, where he's fighting her, and he's just very stoic, just fighting, just blocking. She stabs him, he doesn't make a sound. He just kind of, she stabs him again. He falls down, doesn't make a sound. She even kisses him as like the kiss
Yeah,
goodbye. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And she gets his blood on her face, and she wipes. She goes, "I'm the best one." And it's like, wow. And she gets into the car, and you're like, this is it for Deckard. Like, this is it. And all of a sudden, like Kay out of nowhere just comes in and throws her to the top of the vehicle, and he's choking her, and he throws her underneath the water, and you hear him again. We have this other moment of like this human emotion. He just yells, like he's just and he's just yelling and yelling, and little by little you start to see her fade. You start to see her fade until there's completely nothing left, and he ultimately retires her under the water.
So we have another memed moment here.
Oh yeah,
it's our ending.
Yeah, dude. Everybody, this was me when TikTok was banned for a little bit. I was like, just giving up. But yeah, this has been memed everywhere.
So Kay stages Deckard's death to protect him from Wallace and the Replicant freedom movement before taking Deckard to Dr. Anna Stelline's office and handing him her toy horse.
Mm-hmm.
As Kay dies on the steps, looking up at the falling snow, Deckard enters the building and tearfully meets his daughter for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's our movie. So let's go ahead here with our initial thoughts. So I will say this. I've seen this a few times now. And the first time I saw it, it really wasn't for me. And I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the first Blade Runner movie. You know, I get it. Like it's a big science fiction piece. It's you know, it's very important to the genre. It's important to film as well, but not one of my favorites. You know, love Ridley Scott, by the way. Love Ridley Scott,
dudes, yeah.
Not one of my favorites. So when I saw this, it was like, okay, I mean, I wasn't asking for this, but you know, it's Denis. This I'm feeling this trailer, so I saw it, and the biggest complaint I had was it felt slow. Like the action moments were great, the wow moments are great, but to get to each moment, it just felt slow. Plus, the movie was a little long too, like 2 hours 45 minutes.
Oh yeah, this movie's got some length, man.
Yeah. So I saw it another time, 2 maybe 3 more times, and it just wasn't hitting. So maybe I needed to leave it alone for a little bit. So now I watched it again, and I just have come to the conclusion that it's just the way the movie was. It wasn't the concept of the movie, because I really love the concept of the movie. And when I first saw this, I was kind of confused as well as what a replicant is, you know, because I was confused. I was thinking, are they people? Is it a robot? I don't know. But now that I know it's a genetically engineered human, that changes the conversation, because essentially it's, okay, these are people. They might not have a soul, but they're still people. So that's what makes it important. And the concept of the replicant being born is it's the thing that holds this whole movie together. Also, I was able to kind of look into the deeper themes of the movie as well on this rewatch. And it was Joi that did it for me, actually, because it was just that dual relationship here with the humans to the replicants, and then everybody to the AI, you know, and we only touch on it. AI is not even a question in this movie. It's about replicants and humans. But here we have an AI that is behaving like a human, and, you know, saying that they have emotions like a human. So for me, I think it was just that duality of Kay dealing with being a replicant and working for the humans, and also his relationship with Joi, and then how he's pushed to protect the replicant that was born. So that was my take from, you know, from this rewatch. Ricardo, this is one of your favorite Denis movies, and one of your favorite movies, period.
This is one of my favorite movies, man. This hits all the right notes for me as a big sci-fi guy. Again, when I went to the theater to see that, as soon as the movie opened up with the music swell, Hans Zimmer goated, obviously. The scale of the movie, I was kind of like, oh, we're in it now. Like, I was like, I'm going to enjoy this. And I appreciated all the moments and the themes of the movie, if you will. I like Blade Runner. I think Blade Runner 2049 is a better movie. I like Blade Runner 2049 more than Blade Runner. Again, there's like 3 versions of the original Blade Runner, and I do enjoy it. I've seen all of them. I do enjoy them. And I think that they are very, the first Blade Runner is very important to the sci-fi film genre, et cetera, et cetera. Really, Scott is amazing. But there was something about this one, because obviously in the first movie, we're questioning the idea, obviously, what is what is a replicant? That's in the first movie as well. Like, what separates human beings from replicants? Like, we're talking about having a soul. Like, that's a theme in the first movie as well. But I appreciate the second movie because we have this idea of offspring, and that kind of changes the game a lot. Like, we're talking about like the ability to reproduce, and it's like, well, wait a minute. And again, we're introducing this AI counterpart, Joi, which is super important because, again, as Kay's character in the movie is reflecting and feeling things, and if he's a replicant and he can feel these things and he can feel emotion, he can have doubts, he can feel love, he can feel lonely, maybe he should be more open to the fact that Joi can as well. Like, we have this duality between these two characters because, again, as the movie's playing, Kay is very much like, oh, you don't have to say these things, you don't have to do that, you don't like this, you don't like that book, you don't do it. Like, it's very it almost feels like every so often he's reminding himself, hey, she's not real. Like, she's not real. But as the movie's going on, he as a replicant are dealing with all these internal struggles, and it was something that I really enjoyed about the movie. But yeah, this movie lands for me in every aspect. Like, this is where I saw Bautista for the first time in a movie where I felt like, oh man, we got to keep our eye on Dave Bautista, man. Like, if this is the route he's taking, he's going to be amazing, have a great career. And then we have this idea of Harrison Ford coming back. We got a great legacy sequel. As you mentioned, legacy sequels are hard, man, because, and let's be perfectly honest, there are many movies where people have hoped for a sequel many years later, 15, 20, 30 years later, and they make them, and sometimes they get lost in, should we be more nostalgic? Should we be more like the first movie with subtle differences? Do we want to feature more of a legacy character more than a new character? Like, there's a lot to balance and juggle. And I think that when I was done watching this for the first time, especially now on the rewatch, I feel like Denis did it like in just the right way, because the entire movie's playing, and at no point was I sitting there as a fan of the original going, where's Rick Deckard? Like, why are we taking so long to get that wasn't happening, because I was engaged with the characters that we were introduced to, and that's so important. You could talk about the new Star Wars films, you can talk about the Ghostbusters legacy sequel, you can talk about all these movies, and you're going to have a lot of people going like, oh, maybe these movies rely too much on nostalgia, maybe the movies focus too much on the new characters, and I wanted the core characters. You can't please everybody, but I feel like Blade Runner 2049, for me at least, found that balance, because Kay's story was so intriguing, but the world was still so familiar from the original Blade Runner, and Rick Deckard doesn't come in until almost the closing of the movie, and at no point am I missing him. And it's not because I think Kay's a better character, that's not the case at all. It's just that the story was just that engaging to me that I was along for the ride. So this movie worked for me. And it's absolutely one of my favorite movies. This is a must own in the Rick library. I have it on Blu-ray. I've seen this movie probably anywhere from 6 to 8 times, and it's a long movie, but I will make time to watch it. But I appreciate the movie as a whole.
Right. And I want to just stress this phrase that I've been using a lot lately. I think the film is done really well.
Yes.
It's just, I don't think it's for me.
And that's perfectly fine. That is, that worked.
Like, I think I'm appreciating it a lot more. I feel sometimes when I'm not feeling a movie, it takes me a few rewatches before I start getting it. And sometimes I never get it. It's just at this stage, I'm feeling it a little bit more, but it's just not for me. Maybe if the movie was cut down a half hour, maybe. I don't know if that's what it is, or maybe if it's the themes and the execution and such. But the score is solid. Visually, this movie is beautiful.
It looks incredible, man.
The movie is beautiful. The concepts, I love these kinds of concepts. First the replicants, and then the AI as well, and such. There's a lot of different aspects, and the fight scenes are great. The action scenes are great. It's just the execution of everything, it just didn't land for me as much, but that's okay. I can still appreciate it as a film, though. As a film, very well done. Absolutely.
And I think that's key in having these types of conversations, because oftentimes, especially when we talk about movies, and we both had these situations, we both had these movies, you and I both have had experience, and we watch a movie and we can appreciate the movie for what it is, what it did, and how well it was crafted, and go, you know what, it's not for me, but I can appreciate everything about the movie regardless. And that's a good experience to have, and it's a good conversation to have, because it's not so much, especially when we talk about movies, you don't have to strongly hate a movie. You don't have
Right.
to strongly dislike a movie. You could be like, hey, it didn't work for me, but I appreciate everything about this movie and what it did and whatnot. And that works. That's totally fine. And like, who knows, like you said, if they shaved off even an hour, you might have a
Maybe.
completely different feeling. If who knows if they made a third movie and they went back to this universe and you figured out, well, I actually really do like the universe, but I like this story more. Like there's a lot of things that could have played a role. But it's still good. It's still good to acknowledge, yeah, like when you can appreciate a film for what it is. So like nobody loses when you're able to do that. Everybody wins.
So let's take a look at the box office here and the Oscars. The budget was anywhere between 150 to 185 million. So they finally gave Denis some money.
Yeah, he gave your boy a budget, and you see it.
This is what he did with it. He made an
Yep.
incredible looking movie, an incredible sounding movie as well. Unfortunately, it didn't get a return on the box office as much as they had hoped.
Oh yeah, this bummed me out a lot, man. I
Yeah,
remember this. Yeah.
it didn't do double, not even double. It came out to 276
Mhm.
0.76 million. So when you take into account the box office return, it's the
Mhm.
budget plus it's almost like double when you include the marketing, something
Yeah,
like that.
marketing is big.
You
Yeah.
know, so you're looking at double to 3 times, two to 2.5 to 3 times to actually say it was a profit. You know, if you make above your budget, that's still a win, though.
Yeah.
You know, above your budget is still a win, but they wanted it to do a little bit more. But it is what it is.
This, I'm not gonna lie, when this movie came out and I saw the budget, I was sad. I remember trying to get everybody to go see this movie, man. I
Yeah.
was like, go see Blade Runner 2049, go see it. But again, and we talk about this, you're talking about a 30-year gap
Right.
between the first movie and the second movie. I guarantee there were tons of people who are, you know, casual moviegoers, which take up a lot of the market, saw this and just thought it was just, you know, a new movie. And
Right.
it wasn't like a trailer just didn't do it for them. There was no prior engagement to them. It was just like, okay, that looks like a sci-fi movie I could wait for. No big deal. For people like you, like me, and many other people that know what Blade Runner is, I was immediately invested. I was like, "Ooh, we're coming back. Harrison Ford's coming back. Ryan Gosling here. Denis Villeneuve is directing." And up to this point, we were really familiar with his game. You know what I mean? And we
Right.
were like, and like from our perspective, it's like, oh man, like just from the trailer alone, I remember looking at it and going, wow, they gave your boy Denis a big budget. Just by looking at the trailer, I was like, all right, now we're gonna see what he can do on a grand scale. So that was exciting to watch. But yeah, like for a lot of people, man, like it was just one of those things where it was like, you know, that's a 30-year gap, man. If you weren't familiar, it just kind of looked like another sci-fi movie that people thought they could pass on. And it happens. But dude, you could have said I worked for the company at the time because I was trying to get everybody to see it. I was like, go see it.
There was critical acclaim. It wasn't like it
Yeah.
got panned or anything like that. It just
Yeah.
didn't perform as well as they had hoped.
Yeah.
However, Blade Runner did make some noise at the Oscars the following year, something that continues to happen for Denis as
Good.
his career moves along here. It was nominated for 5 overall, and it won 2. So the ones that it didn't win, but the nominations were Best Sound Mixing, Best Sound Editing, and Best Production Design. And it won for Best Cinematography and Best Visual Effects, of course.
I believe it.
So, and as we see here, a lot of Denis movies, they get these technological achievements, you know, and being recognized and such. Alrighty, so let's move forward with some trivia here before we start taking a look at the cast. So David Bowie was director Denis Villeneuve's first choice for the role of Neander Wallace, Jared Leto's role. But he died 6 months before the start of shooting. Jared Leto was cast instead because of his similar rock star vibe, since he's the frontman for the band 30 Seconds to Mars. So
yeah,
if David Bowie hadn't passed away, that's who he would have played.
Yeah.
The original, you touched on this before, the original Blade Runner is known for having 3 different cuts released throughout the years. When questioned about the possibility of a future alternative cut of his movie, director Denis Villeneuve stated that the theatrical cut is his only version. At one point, there was a 4-hour rough cut of this movie.
I wanted it, bro. I wanted it. I was like, give it to me. Give me the 4-hour cut.
It had been split into 2 parts for a more convenient viewing, and the makers discovered that each part almost felt like a complete movie on its own. They briefly considered them as 2 separately titled movies, but Villeneuve decided that it should be cut down to just one definitive version. So that explains why the movie's so quote-unquote long. It's almost 3 hours long.
He almost had 2 movies in there.
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, we'll make it work.
I would have been interested to see where the first one ended and where the second one started.
Yeah, and I would have loved to see it. And who knows, maybe it was they thought about, like, again, a possible box office return. Is like, oh man, we if we make this a 2-parter and the first one doesn't do well, the second one might not do well at all. Like, that can come into play. Or maybe he felt like, you know what, nope, let's just wrap it in one movie. But yeah, you can, like, I'm like, oh man, I wonder where it would have ended to set up for the next one. I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Composer Johan Johannesson was working with director Denis Villeneuve on Prisoners, Sicario, and Arrival. So he'd already done 3 movies with him. He was attached to compose the music for Blade Runner 2049. He had started work on a score that featured his unique signature, but in August 2017, he dropped out of the project because Villeneuve and the producers preferred a score that would more resemble I can't pronounce this right. Vangelis's music from Blade Runner, the original. Okay. So composer Hans Zimmer, along with Benjamin Wallfish, was hired to replace Johansson. So he went from Johansson to Zimmer. All right, we're still good.
Yeah, bro. Like, you can't go to anybody better, to be honest. If you're like, hey, we have to go in a different direction, and you have the name Hans Zimmer, I'm like, oh, okay, we're good.
When you talk about scores and composers, Zimmer's in the GOAT conversation,
absolutely,
in my opinion. So, and Johansson did a great job. Prisoner, Sicario, Arrival, great.
Oh, scores. I have his albums too. I downloaded his music as well. Incredible work.
Yeah, great scores. But he was able to get Zimmer to come on here. Here's a tidbit about Ana de Armas. So Ana de Armas had no problem performing the nude scenes, but she refused to cut her hair short for the role, so they used a wig instead.
She's like, yeah, I'm not cutting my hair.
I'll be nude, but don't you dare cut my hair.
Yep. So, she was like, nope, I'm thinking about other roles in the future. Leave my hair be. I was like, okay.
Good for her. Lastly, let's get a little sweaty here with some comic book knowledge. Ryan Gosling was the first choice to play the Joker in David Ayer's Suicide Squad 2016.
That's crazy, yeah.
A role that ultimately went to Jared Leto. Now, David Bowie, who was the first choice for Leto's role in this movie before his death in 2016, was also considered to play the Joker in Batman 89, the Tim Burton movie, potentially opposite Harrison Ford as Batman.
Bro, dude, yeah.
That's a nice tie in there, right?
Yeah.
That's good stuff. So let's close out with the cast here. We have Ryan Gosling, of course, as Kay, Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard, Ana de Armas as Joy, Sylvia Hoeks as Love. We have Robin Wright as Lieutenant Joshi. We have Mackenzie Davis as Mariette, Carla Jury as Dr. Anna Celine, Dave Bautista as Sapper Morton, Jared Leto as Neander Wallace. We have Edward James Olmos. He comes back as Gaff. And obviously, and I mentioned Sean Young. She came back as well. So Edward James Olmos, Sean Young, and Harrison Ford were the only 3 from the original Blade Runner that came back again for this. So good job to everybody. But shout out to Dave Bautista in sort of a breakout role here. Well,
yeah, man.
He had already been Drax, so maybe Drax is his breakout role, but this was the role where people were like, he can act.
I think this was the role, because obviously, like you said, the breakout role was Drax. Super great for Bautista's career. Super comedic performance, but I feel like this was the role that Dave Bautista got to sink his teeth into something dramatic and raw and real. And I think this was what kind of started to shift his career a little bit in terms of what roles he wanted to take on. Marvel was, you know, how he came onto the scene. And I think this was kind of like what led him to go down that path of being like, I want to just be the best actor I can be. So yeah, he has to get a shout out, because I remember watching this, as I mentioned earlier, was seeing him on screen and just being blown away. And some people would probably say like, oh, but he doesn't do much in the movie. Like, he's only in it for a few minutes. And I'm like, yeah, but those few minutes he's there, like just put the role of Drax next to Sapper Morton and just look at the distinction between the two and see the difference in styles and acting from Batista. It's incredible. So yeah, your boy got to get a shout out.
So you said you really liked Love in this movie.
Oh, she was great, man.
So Sylvia Hoeks, you really liked her character of Love. And
she was awesome.
To that point, I think she was great. And for me, it's Joi. I mean, Ana de Armas is awesome in this movie. It's just one of those roles where like she's on screen just enough to make an impact. And for me, that's what makes a standout. And de Armas, she'd been in a few things before this. Let me see here: Hands of Stone, War Dogs, Blade Runner 2049, and then she started getting more roles. Her first true lead was probably in Knives Out a few years later, but I really enjoyed her in this. And so that's it for me as far as my standouts go.
Oh yeah, again, for me, I can talk about Batista all day. Batista was great. And then obviously Sylvia Hoeks as Love. She had this great performance throughout the movie, because there'd be moments with her where she wouldn't say anything and she's doing all this eye acting, and you would just see tears stream down her face without anything else happening. No hyperventilating, no heavy breathing, just standing there and just do. And she was awesome, and she had this intensity to her that when you're first introduced to her in the movie, to Love as a character, she's just very much there in the scene, hands folded, kind of guiding our character Kay through the scene. But she has this intensity, man, especially when she kills Joshi. Like, it's just this raw intensity, and the fight sequences, she's amazing. So she's a huge standout as well. Everyone does a phenomenal job. Ryan Gosling does great. Harrison Ford taps right back into Rick Deckard. And as I mentioned, that a lot of times, and it does happen, where after a while, when you see someone come back for a legacy role or something, and not always, but sometimes you feel like, they're kind of just in the motions, like they're kind of just back in the movie, but like he taps back into Rick Deckard. But yeah, Ana de Armas, you know what it is? Ana de Armas has like, I don't know, she has like this glimmer to her. Like whenever she's on screen, it's her eyes, it's her presentation, it's everything. But her delivery, she had like this hopeful nature in the movie where there's so much happening, especially with Kay, and there's all this turmoil, and then she would periodically just pop up and it would change the dynamic of the scene. Like it would completely change, and you would have this hopeful feeling. And she's playing something that's not, again, what is real, what is not real, and she's doing it in a way that I'm buying everything that she's giving off. So yeah, she's a huge standout too. And like we talked about earlier, and that you had mentioned, I think this was the movie for Ana de Armas, where people started to really look at her as well and go, okay, wait a minute, like she's got something.
It's a movie with a lot of doom and gloom, let's be honest. So that's another reason why whenever Joi comes on screen, she's just injecting that life and that hope, as he would say, so that's another reason why.
There's a reason why she's named Joi. You know what I mean? Like she brings that joy whenever she's on screen.
Alrighty, we're going to start winding things down with our closing thoughts now. And we touched on it a little bit as far as legacy sequels go. And it's just that age-old question of, should we consider sequels for movies that have been, that haven't gotten a sequel, and it's just such an interesting question, because recently we saw, we never thought that Top Gun needed a sequel, and Top Gun Maverick.
Oh my God, incredible.
What a great experience that was, it had been many years since the last Scream movie, Scream 4, over 10 years, I don't know the exact amount of time. And then Scream 5 comes out, and it just re-injects life back into the franchise. You know, after all these years, we finally got a true sequel to Ghostbusters 2,
Oh my god.
you know, and it
Yeah.
worked out. But I don't want to name them on the air here, but sometimes it doesn't work out.
Mhm.
So for me, it just depends on who you put, who you put in the hands of the sequel
Mhm.
itself. It depends on the situation, and you kind of have to look at the production value, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
see, are they involving the original filmmakers in some way? That probably has a little bit to do with it. I read that Ridley Scott is still listed as a producer on
Okay.
this film. Who are they consulting? How much are you involving the actors from the original? And
Mhm.
you said this. Is nostalgia a part of it? Are you leaning on the nostalgia too much, or are you just going to tap into it a little bit? There's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of factors into what makes a legacy sequel successful,
Mhm.
regardless of how Blade Runner 2049 did at the box office. There's talks that for them to come back and do it again.
Mhm.
You know, it's being rumored and such. But what are your thoughts on the legacy sequel and how this relates to Blade Runner 2049, Ricardo?
The legacy sequel obviously is a very difficult thing to touch on, and obviously you're juggling a lot of pieces. I think you said something that's very important. It really depends on who's crafting the project, who's got their hands in it, because obviously, and this has happened numerous times with legacy sequels, where you'll see a legacy sequel that feels very studio driven, where it doesn't have this authentic feel to it, where
Right.
you're like, and that's where the term, like, we've heard this term plenty of times, like, oh, it's a cash grab. They're
Right.
taking the name and they're making a cash grab about it. Some would argue for some movies that have come out many, many, many years later that felt that way. They're like, oh, it feels more like a cash grab. It doesn't really feel like an honorable sequel. um I've had conversations with people about the Jumanji sequel that came out many, many, many years later. And they're like, well, this doesn't actually feel like a sequel to the original 90s Jumanji. It feels almost like a sibling. It could be there, but it's not there. So it works for some people, it doesn't work for others. But legacy sequels are extremely difficult. And when it comes to Blade Runner 2049, I think Blade Runner 2049 was a reminder that it can be done. It really matters who's crafting the project. I joked with you a couple days ago when we talked about Blade Runner 2049. I remember vividly watching a Comic-Con panel with Denis Villeneuve where they asked him, like, oh, what made you really agree to do the project? Like, what was it that made you want to do it? And he goes, oh, like, I wanted to do it because I felt someone else was going to mess it up. Now, he used different language to be funny, but he was like, oh, like someone else was going to mess it up. And when I heard that, I just felt like, okay, that means he cares about it. Like, he cares about it to the point where he's like, okay, no, I'm going to do it because I'm worried that if someone else does it, they're not going to give it the care and love that it needs. And I feel like that is very apparent throughout the movie. Again, you feel it. This feels just like the same universe. It feels like we're in the exact same world with how everyone is treated. The characters are treated in such a way that when our legacy characters do appear, we're not missing them too much, and where are they, what's going on. And we've seen other legacy sequels do that. You mentioned Ghostbusters. We finally got an official sequel to Ghostbusters 2. That was a movie that I felt handled it just right. There's some nostalgia in it, but it focuses on our new characters.
Right.
And our legacy characters return, but they're only there to give like an additional push, you know what I mean? And it's all about balance. I think legacy sequels are all about balance. Unfortunately, there are many that I've seen that I was rooting for that just didn't land with me, because I'm like, oh
Right.
man. And I wonder, sometimes I go, oh, was it too long? Did we wait too long? Did we miss the boat? Is that what it is? Or has this genre or this feel or the people who worked on it just not in the same place they were? So there's a lot of variables. So legacy sequels are very difficult, but I think Blade Runner 2049 for me personally is a reminder of how you do one, because this
Right.
landed for me in every aspect. it felt like it was made by someone who loved the universe. I was bummed we didn't get more. I was like, can we get a series? Can we get a part 3? Can we just explore this world? How many stories can we have where we're in this world? There was a show that came out on Netflix a couple years ago, if you remember, Alter Carbon, where a lot of people said that it felt like a Blade Runner thing, and I felt it, and it just felt so cool to be there again. But yeah, legacy sequels, very difficult, all about balance. It really matters who's crafting it, and I think when it comes to Blade Runner 2049, we saw that Denis Villeneuve was just the right person for the job, because it feels well crafted and well loved. And for someone like me who enjoyed the first movie and absolutely loves Blade Runner 2049, it shows us that it can happen.
So we didn't touch on this. We have Blade Runner 2099, and that's coming up on Amazon Prime.
Good.
So
give it to me.
It's going to serve as a sequel to the films Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. So that's coming, and I think that's the only like notable thing I can see here that I saw that's coming out here. So, alrighty. Folks, that was the Panel Bros official breakdown for Blade Runner 2049. If you could please give us a like, share, and subscribe at the Panel Bros on YouTube, we'd appreciate it. Those likes, shares, and subscribes help our reach. Also, if you could leave us a comment below letting us know how you felt about our breakdown of Blade Runner 2049. And if you could also let us know how you felt about the movie as well, we'd appreciate that. Folks, stick around. We are continuing through our filmography for Denis Villeneuve, and our next one is Dune Part 1.
Yeah.
So, we talk about epic movies. I think Dune qualifies as an epic movie, so please stick around for that. For Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying thank you for coming to the panel.